My wife faked a miscarriage to afford a vacation with her friends, so I destroyed her reputation. I found the boarding pass in the dryer lint trap, a crumpled piece of paper with her name printed on it, destination Cancun, dated 3 weeks after she told me our baby died. I stood there in the laundry room holding this soggy piece of evidence, while my hands started shaking so badly I had to set down the detergent bottle before I dropped it. The date kept jumping out at me. 3 weeks after the miscarriage. 3 weeks after I held her while she sobbed in the hospital bed, promising we'd try again, that we'd get through this together. 3 weeks after I took a week off work to take care of her, cooking meals she barely touched, running baths, sleeping on the couch because she said she needed space in our bed to grieve properly. I'd been married to Vanessa for 6 years. We met at a mutual friend's wedding where she caught the bouquet and I caught the garter. Everyone joked we were next, and 18 months later, we were. She worked in marketing at a mid-sized advertising firm downtown. I worked as a project manager for a construction company. We had a nice house in the suburbs, 2 cars, a golden retriever named Copper, the kind of life people post about on social media with captions about being blessed. We'd been trying to get pregnant for about 8 months when she finally showed me the positive test. I remember that morning perfectly because I cried. Actually cried. I picked her up and spun her around our kitchen until she laughed and told me to put her down before I made her dizzy. We called our parents that same day, couldn't wait to share the news. My mom cried. Her dad opened a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for something special. We were having a baby. Everything felt right. The first trimester went smoothly according to Vanessa. She had morning sickness, complained about being tired all the time, but the doctor said everything looked good at her 8-week appointment. I wanted to go with her to every appointment, but she insisted I didn't need to miss work for the early ones. Said she'd let me know when there was something to actually see on the ultrasound. Made sense at the time. She was independent like that, never wanted to be a burden. I loved that about her. At least I thought I did. Looking back now, I wonder how many other appointments she went to alone, how many other things she handled privately that I should have questioned. Then came the phone call at work. I was in a meeting with contractors going over blueprints for a new commercial development when my phone rang. Vanessa's name on the screen. I normally wouldn't have answered, but something made me excuse myself and step outside. Her voice sounded hollow when she said my name. She was at the hospital. There was bleeding. The baby was gone. Could I come now, please? I drove 90 miles an hour down the highway. Didn't care about speed limits or traffic laws. Got to the emergency room and found her in a curtained area, still in her work clothes, mascara streaked down her face. A nurse was checking her vitals. The doctor came in shortly after I arrived, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes who explained what happened. Sometimes these things just occur in the first trimester. Nobody's fault. Nature's way. All the clinical phrases people use when they don't know what else to say. Vanessa was devastated. Or at least, that's what I believed at the time. She couldn't work for 2 weeks, called in sick every day, barely left our bedroom. I brought her food on trays. She'd pick at it and leave most of it untouched. I found her crying in the bathroom at odd hours, sitting on the floor with her knees pulled up to her chest. I held her, told her we'd try again when she was ready, that we had time. She was only 29. I was 32. We had years ahead of us. She nodded against my shoulder but didn't say much. The grief felt enormous and suffocating in our house. I took down the ultrasound photo we'd put on the fridge, packed away the pregnancy books she'd been reading. Tried to make things easier for her however I could. Her friends rallied around her too, or so I thought. Brittany came over with wine and takeout. Kayla sent flowers with a card about strength and healing. Amy texted her daily, checking in, offering to talk whenever Vanessa needed. Jessica organized a girls' night at our house about 3 weeks after the miscarriage. Said Vanessa needed to get out of her own head, be around people who loved her. I thought it was sweet. Went to my buddy's place that night to give them space. When I came home around midnight, Vanessa seemed lighter somehow. Said it felt good to laugh again. Said her friends were planning a weekend trip to help her heal, get away from everything for a bit, clear her head. I encouraged her to go. Told her she deserved it after everything she'd been through. If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. She left on a Friday morning, hugged me goodbye, said she loved me, promised to text when they got to the Airbnb in the mountains. I kissed her forehead and told her to have fun. Went to work feeling good about supporting her healing process. That weekend I cleaned the house, caught up on yard work, watched football with Copper on the couch. Vanessa texted a few times. Photos of scenic views, messages about how peaceful it was. I replied with hearts and told her I missed her. She came home Sunday night looking relaxed and tanned. I noticed the tan but didn't think much of it. Maybe the mountain sun was stronger than expected. She seemed happy. That's what mattered to me. Life went back to normal after that, or what I thought was normal. Vanessa returned to work, started going out with her friends more often. Girls' nights, happy hours, weekend brunches. I didn't mind. She'd been through trauma. She deserved joy, deserved to feel like herself again. We talked about trying for another baby eventually, but she said she needed more time, wanted to make sure she was mentally ready. I understood completely, or I thought I understood. Really, I was just being naive, believing everything she told me because why would my wife lie about losing our child? What kind of person does that? The boarding pass changed everything. I stood in that laundry room staring at it for probably 20 minutes. My brain couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Cancun. Not the mountains. Not some peaceful Airbnb retreat. A beach resort in Mexico. The dates lined up with her girl's weekend, the one that was supposed to help her heal from our miscarriage. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photos she'd sent me that weekend. Scenic mountain views. Except now that I really looked at them, something felt off. The quality was weird, pixelated in places. I reverse image searched them. They were stock photos, downloaded from a free travel website. My wife had sent me fake photos while she was actually in Cancun. I sat down on the floor of our laundry room and tried to breathe. Copper came over and put his head on my lap, sensing something was wrong. I petted him mechanically while my mind raced. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe the mountain trip fell through and they pivoted to Mexico. Maybe she didn't tell me because she didn't want me to worry about the cost. I grasped for reasonable explanations, even though nothing about this felt reasonable. I checked our bank accounts on my phone. We had joint checking and savings, but we each had our own credit cards for personal expenses. Her statement wasn't accessible to me, but our joint account showed no unusual charges around that time. Nothing that would indicate a last-minute international trip. I needed to think this through logically. I got up, found my laptop, sat at the kitchen table, and started going through everything methodically. I logged into our joint account and went through transactions from the past 6 months. Most were normal. Groceries, utilities, mortgage, insurance. Then I found something odd. 2 weeks before her supposed miscarriage, there was a withdrawal. $5,000. Cash withdrawal from our savings account. I'd never noticed it before because I didn't check our savings regularly. We were both good about contributing to it automatically each month, but neither of us touched it much. It was our emergency fund, our future house renovation fund, our someday buy a boat fund. $5,000 gone. I checked the date again. 2 weeks before she told me she was miscarrying. My stomach dropped. I went back through her behavior during that 2-week period. She'd been normal, happy even, talking about baby names, looking at cribs online, showing me cute maternity clothes she wanted to buy. Then suddenly, she was miscarrying. Suddenly, our baby was gone. Suddenly, she needed time away with her friends. Suddenly, she was in Cancun with $5,000 of our money. The pieces were arranging themselves into a picture I didn't want to see, a picture that made me feel sick. My hands were shaking again. I closed the laptop because if I kept looking, I'd have to accept what I was seeing. I wasn't ready yet. Needed time to process. Needed to be wrong about this. I called my brother. David answered on the third ring, sounding confused because I never called him during work hours. I told him I needed to talk. Could I come over after work? He said yes immediately, told me he'd order pizza. I spent the rest of my workday in a daze, going through motions, signing off on things without really reading them. My project supervisor asked if I was feeling okay. I said I might be coming down with something. He told me to go home early. I did. Drove to David's apartment instead of my house because I couldn't face Vanessa yet. Couldn't pretend everything was fine when my entire reality was fracturing. David was 2 years older than me, divorced, worked as an accountant. He opened the door with a beer already in his hand, gave me one without saying anything. We sat on his couch, and I told him everything. The boarding pass, the cash withdrawal, the stock photos, the timeline that didn't make sense. He listened without interrupting, his expression getting darker as I talked. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said the thing I'd been trying not to think. Asked if I was sure she was ever actually pregnant. The question hit me like a physical blow. I'd never even considered that possibility. Never thought to question whether the pregnancy itself was real. She'd shown me the positive test, told me about her symptoms, went to doctor appointments, had a miscarriage in the hospital with actual doctors and nurses present. How could that all be fake? David suggested I find out for sure before jumping to conclusions. Said maybe there was still an explanation I hadn't thought of. Said maybe I should talk to her directly, give her a chance to explain. But something in his voice told me he didn't believe that. He thought I was right. He thought my wife had faked a miscarriage to steal our money for a vacation. The thought made me want to throw up. I stayed at David's until almost midnight, drinking his beer and trying to figure out what to do next. He offered to let me crash on his couch. I considered it, but decided to go home. I needed to see Vanessa's face when I walked in. Needed to see if I could tell whether she was capable of this level of deception. She was already in bed when I got home, reading on her phone. Looked up and smiled when I came into the bedroom. Asked where I'd been. I said I grabbed drinks with David. She nodded and went back to her phone. I got ready for bed, brushed my teeth while staring at myself in the bathroom mirror, trying to recognize the person looking back at me, the person whose wife might have faked losing their baby. I climbed into bed next to her. She kissed me goodnight and turned off her lamp. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathing even out as she fell asleep. She slept peacefully, while I stared at the ceiling until dawn. I called in sick to work the next morning, waited until Vanessa left for her job before getting out of bed. I needed to search the house, needed to find proof one way or another. I started in her nightstand drawer, nothing unusual. Moved to her dresser drawers. Regular clothes, jewelry, nothing significant. Checked her closet, went through coat pockets, purse pockets, shoe boxes, found receipts from stores, Old shopping lists, loose change, nothing about Mexico or pregnancies or lies. I went through the bathroom cabinets, found the positive pregnancy test in a Ziploc bag at the back of the drawer under the sink. She'd kept it. I pulled it out and looked at it closely for the first time. The result window showed 2 lines. Positive. But something nagged at me about it. I took a photo with my phone and did some research. Turned out you can buy positive pregnancy tests online. Women sell them to other women for various reasons. Some innocent like pranks or announcements, some not. There are entire websites dedicated to it. I felt sick reading through forums where women discussed the best places to buy them, how to make sure they looked authentic, how long the hormones stayed detectable. I compared the test I found to images online. It looked identical to the kind you could purchase. That didn't prove anything definitively, but combined with everything else, the evidence was mounting. I put the test back exactly where I found it and kept searching. Her home office was next. She had a desk in our spare bedroom where she sometimes worked from home or handled personal business. I'd never gone through it before. Felt wrong invading her privacy like that, but everything felt wrong now. I started with the desk drawers, files for taxes, insurance documents, work stuff. Then I found a folder labeled Personal Medical in the bottom drawer. Inside were papers from her OB/GYN, appointment summaries. I read through them carefully. There was a record of an initial pregnancy visit dated about 8 months ago, notes about a positive urine test, estimated due date calculated, prenatal vitamins prescribed, then a follow-up appointment 2 weeks later. And that's where things got strange. The notes from the second appointment were sparse. Just one line. Patient reports miscarriage, confirmed via ultrasound, no intervention needed. That was it. No details about being in the emergency room. No mention of the hospital I'd rushed to. This was an office visit. Scheduled. Routine. I checked the date. It was 3 days before she called me from the hospital. 3 days before the emergency, before the bleeding and the trauma and the devastation. She'd already had a confirmed miscarriage at her regular doctor's office. Then 3 days later, she staged an emergency room visit. Why would she do that? Unless the office visit was also fabricated somehow. Unless none of this was real. I took photos of every document in that folder. Then I noticed something else. A receipt paper-clipped to the back of the medical records. From a medical supply store. Dated 1 month before her supposed miscarriage. The items listed made my blood run cold. Fake blood capsules. Pregnancy test. Positive. Medical-grade trauma makeup. I stared at that receipt until the words blurred. She'd purchased props. Literal props to stage this entire thing. My wife had bought supplies to fake a miscarriage like she was preparing for a theater performance. The receipt total was $38. She'd destroyed our marriage, stolen $5,000, and manufactured grief and trauma for $38 worth of craft supplies. I sat on the floor of that spare bedroom and cried. Not gentle tears, but ugly sobbing that came from somewhere deep and broken. Copper found me and curled up next to me, and I held on to him like he was the only real thing left in my life. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that my legs went numb. Long enough that the sun shifted and the room got darker. Eventually, I pulled myself together enough to think clearly. I needed help. Professional help. Legal help. I needed to document everything and figure out what to do with this information. I couldn't confront Vanessa without a plan. Couldn't let her know I knew without protecting myself first. If this story keeps your interest, please subscribe to get more stories like this. I called a lawyer that afternoon. Found him through a Google search for divorce attorneys in our area with good reviews. His name was David Foster. Had been practicing family law for 23 years according to his website. His receptionist said he had an opening at 4 o'clock if I could make it. I said I'd be there. Spent the next 2 hours organizing my evidence. Photos of the boarding pass, screenshots of our bank accounts showing the withdrawal, pictures of the medical supply receipt, photos of the medical records from her office. I put everything in a folder on my phone and drove to Foster's office in a glass building downtown. David Foster was in his 50s, gray hair, sharp suit, firm handshake. He sat me down in his office that overlooked the city and asked me to explain why I was there. I told him everything, showed him the evidence. He listened carefully, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and was quiet for a moment. Then he said this was one of the more unusual cases he'd encountered. Asked if I'd confronted my wife yet. I said no. He said that was smart. Told me we needed to gather more evidence before making any moves. Needed to verify the pregnancy was fake, verify the miscarriage was staged, verify where the money went. He said what I had was compelling but circumstantial. We needed medical records from her doctor, bank statements showing where that $5,000 went, proof of the Mexico trip beyond just a boarding pass. Foster explained that faking a miscarriage wasn't necessarily illegal depending on how it was done, but fraud was. If she stole marital assets under false pretenses, that was fraud. If she filed any insurance claims, that was fraud. If she lied to medical professionals to obtain services, that could be fraud. We needed to build a comprehensive case. He charged $250 an hour. I didn't care about the cost. I told him to do whatever was necessary. He said he'd start by subpoenaing her medical records, which he could do as part of divorce proceedings, but I wasn't ready to file yet, wasn't ready to make this official. He suggested gathering everything we could privately first, then filing when we had an airtight case. I left Foster's office feeling slightly more in control. I had a plan now, steps to follow, things to do besides sit in my grief and rage. I drove home and got there before Vanessa, made dinner like normal, set the table, fed Copper. When she walked in at 6:30, I kissed her hello like I'd done thousands of times before, asked about her day. She told me about some client presentation that went well. I smiled and nodded and served pasta like my world wasn't disintegrating. We ate dinner together, watched television together, went to bed together. I played the role of loving husband while gathering evidence against my lying wife. Over the next week, I became someone I didn't recognize. I went through her phone while she was in the shower, found text messages with her friends about Cancun. Jessica had sent photos from the resort. Brittany had complained about her sunburn. Amy had joked about the hot bartender. Kayla had thanked Vanessa for planning such an amazing trip. They all knew. Every single one of her friends knew she'd been in Mexico, not the mountains, which meant they all knew about the lie. Were they in on the miscarriage too? Did they know she faked it? I screenshot every relevant conversation and sent them to myself, then deleted the sent messages from her phone, covered my tracks carefully. I also started tracking her spending. Set up alerts on our joint account for any transaction over $100. Checked her location periodically through Find My Phone, a feature we'd both enabled years ago for safety. She went where she said she was going most of the time. Work, the gym, the grocery store. But on Thursday night, she told me she was having drinks with Kayla, and her phone showed her at a spa 45 minutes away. I drove there, sat in the parking lot and waited. She came out 2 hours later, hair and nails freshly done, carrying shopping bags from the boutique next door. Spent money we didn't have on luxuries she didn't need while I was supposed to believe she was grabbing martinis with her friend. The lies were everywhere once I started looking for them. Small lies, big lies, lies about meaningless things, and lies about earth-shattering things. She'd built an entire alternate reality where she was the grieving mother who deserved treats and trips and sympathy. And I'd believed every word because I loved her, because I trusted her, because I never thought my wife was capable of this level of manipulation. Foster told me this was common in fraud cases. People believe what they want to believe until the evidence becomes overwhelming. He'd seen it dozens of times. Spouses who embezzled from joint accounts, partners who faked illnesses for attention, people who constructed elaborate deceptions that unraveled slowly once someone started pulling threads. 2 weeks after finding the boarding pass, Foster called with news. He'd gotten preliminary medical records through a subpoena. I met him at his office during my lunch break. He spread papers across his desk and walked me through what they showed. Vanessa had never been pregnant. Not 8 months ago. Not ever, according to these records. Her doctor had no record of any pregnancy test, any prenatal visits, any miscarriage. The documents I'd found in her home office were completely fabricated. She'd created fake medical paperwork with her doctor's letterhead, forged signatures, invented appointments that never happened. Foster said this crossed into criminal territory, medical fraud, forgery, potentially identity theft for using her doctor's information. I sat in Foster's office trying to process this information. Some part of me had still hoped I was wrong, still hoped there was an explanation that made sense, still hoped my wife hadn't invented a pregnancy and a miscarriage to steal money. But here was the proof in black and white. Official medical records from her actual physician stating she'd never been pregnant during the time frame in question. No baby, no miscarriage, no loss to grieve. Just an elaborate con to fund a vacation with her friends while I worked overtime to support her supposed recovery. Foster asked if I wanted to involve the police. Said we had enough evidence for fraud charges. I wasn't sure yet. Needed to think about what I wanted the outcome to be. Did I want my wife arrested? Did I want her prosecuted? Or did I just want her exposed, her reputation destroyed, everyone to know what she'd done? Foster said I didn't have to decide immediately. We could keep gathering evidence while I figured out my end goal. He suggested I also see a therapist to help process the emotional trauma of all this. Said he'd seen people crumble under this kind of betrayal without professional support. I took his card for a therapist he recommended. Dr. Margaret Ellis, specialized in trauma and betrayal in relationships. I called Dr. Ellis that afternoon and got an appointment for the following Monday. Spent the weekend pretending everything was normal while dying inside. Vanessa wanted to go to brunch with friends on Sunday. I encouraged her to go. Spent those hours going through our home computer while she was gone. Found search histories she hadn't cleared, websites for buying positive pregnancy tests, forums about faking medical symptoms, articles about early pregnancy signs. She'd researched this, planned it carefully. I took screenshots of everything, built a digital folder of evidence that grew larger every day. Monday evening, I sat in Dr. Ellis's office and told her the entire story. She was in her 60s, warm but professional, with degrees from prestigious universities framed on her wall. She listened without judgment as I explained about the fake pregnancy, the staged miscarriage, the stolen money, the Mexico vacation. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that shifted my entire perspective. She said my wife likely had some form of personality disorder characterized by compulsive lying and manipulation, that this probably wasn't the first time she'd done something like this, that people who can orchestrate this level of deception usually have a pattern of similar behaviors throughout their lives. Dr. Ellis suggested I talk to people who knew Vanessa before me, her family, old friends, ex-boyfriends, see if there were other incidents I didn't know about. I'd never thought to do that, never considered that my wife might have a history of lies I'd never uncovered. I left that session with homework, a list of people to contact, questions to ask, ways to investigate her past without alerting her to my suspicions. It felt like being a detective in my own marriage, uncovering clues about someone I thought I knew completely. I started with her college roommate, Melissa. I found her on social media and sent a message saying I was trying to plan a surprise for Vanessa and wanted to hear old stories from their time at school. Melissa called me instead of messaging back, said she was surprised to hear from me, asked if everything was okay. I said everything was fine, just wanted to do something special for our anniversary. She seemed to accept this and started sharing memories. Some were normal college stories, parties, late-night study sessions, spring break trips, but then she mentioned something odd. Said Vanessa had faked a serious illness their junior year to get extensions on all her finals. Told professors she had mono when she was actually fine. Melissa had confronted her about it and Vanessa had cut her off completely. Stopped speaking to her for 6 months until Melissa apologized for not being supportive. I felt cold hearing this, asked if there were other incidents like that. Melissa hesitated, then said there had been a few times when Vanessa bent the truth for attention or sympathy. Nothing major, just little white lies that seemed harmless at the time. But looking back, Melissa said she'd always wondered if Vanessa had some issues with honesty. They'd drifted apart after college and only kept in touch superficially through social media. I thanked her for sharing and ended the call feeling sick. This wasn't new behavior. This was a pattern going back years. I contacted 2 more of Vanessa's old friends and heard similar stories. A fake cancer scare in her 20s that turned out to be nothing but got her a lot of attention and care from friends. A supposed assault that police investigated and found no evidence of, though she maintained it happened and cut off anyone who questioned her. Small deceptions about jobs and achievements and family crises. None of it seemed severe enough to raise major red flags, but together, they painted a picture of someone who regularly manipulated truth for personal gain. Someone who created dramas and tragedies when her life felt too boring. Someone who needed to be the center of attention, the victim, the person everyone rallied around. I brought this information to Dr. Ellis at my next session. She nodded like she'd expected it, explained that people with certain personality disorders often have long histories of deceptive behavior that escalates over time. That my wife had probably been practicing and perfecting her manipulation tactics for years, that the fake pregnancy was just the biggest, most elaborate version of something she'd been doing her entire adult life. Dr. Ellis asked what I wanted to do with all this information. Did I want to save my marriage? Did I want to confront Vanessa and try to get her help? Or did I want to expose her and walk away? I'd been thinking about this constantly. The truth was, I didn't want to save my marriage. I didn't want to be married to someone who could lie about losing our baby, who could fake medical trauma and steal our money and manipulate me for months, who had apparently been doing variations of this her entire life. I wanted out, but I also wanted her to face consequences. Wanted everyone who believed her lies to know the truth. Wanted her friends who helped facilitate the Mexico vacation to know what they'd been part of. Wanted her family to understand who their daughter really was. Wanted her co-workers and social circle to see behind the mask she wore so convincingly. Dr. Ellis cautioned me about revenge, said it often backfires and doesn't bring the closure people expect. But she also acknowledged that exposing the truth wasn't the same as revenge, that if Vanessa had committed fraud, people deserved to know, that if she'd manipulated not just me, but an entire network of people, they deserved to understand what happened. She helped me think through how to approach this in a way that was about truth and justice, rather than just anger. I appreciated her perspective, needed to make sure I wasn't acting purely out of rage and hurt, even though I felt both of those things intensely. Foster and I met again to discuss next steps. He'd continued gathering evidence. Had bank records showing the $5,000 withdrawal was taken out in cash, untraceable after that point. But he'd subpoenaed her credit card statements and found charges in Cancun that matched the dates of the boarding pass. Resort fees, restaurant charges, spa services, thousands of dollars spent in Mexico while she told me she was healing in the mountains. He'd also found evidence that she'd researched how to fake a miscarriage months before she actually did it. Browser history showing searches for symptoms, how long to wait before trying again, what doctors look for. She'd planned this meticulously. Foster said we had enough for a solid fraud case if I wanted to pursue criminal charges, but he also said divorce with full asset protection might be a better route. Criminal charges could take years and might not result in conviction. A divorce would be faster and give me control over the narrative. I could expose her behavior through divorce proceedings, protect my assets, and move on with my life. I told him I wanted to think about it. He said to take my time but keep gathering evidence. The more we had, the stronger my position would be regardless of which path I chose. That night I came home, and Vanessa was cooking dinner. Something she rarely did. She'd made my favorite meal, pot roast with roasted vegetables, set the table nicely with candles, poured wine. I asked what the occasion was. She smiled and said she just wanted to do something special for me, that I'd been so supportive during her healing process, and she wanted to show appreciation. I looked at her across the table, candlelight making her features soft and beautiful, and felt absolutely nothing. This person I'd loved for 6 years had become a stranger, someone I didn't know at all. We ate dinner, making small talk about our days. She reached across and held my hand, told me she loved me. I said it back automatically. The words meant nothing anymore. After dinner, she suggested we start trying for a baby again, said she felt ready emotionally, that enough time had passed since the miscarriage, that she wanted to move forward with starting our family. I felt rage boil up inside me but kept my face neutral. Told her I thought we should wait a bit longer, make sure we were both really ready. She looked disappointed, but said she understood, kissed me, and said she was going to take a bath. I cleaned up the dishes while imagining all the ways I could expose her lies. The fantasy of watching her face when confronted with evidence was becoming an obsession. I knew I needed to act soon before I exploded, before I confronted her in anger without a plan. I called Foster the next morning and told him I'd made my decision. I wanted a divorce, wanted to file immediately, wanted to include all the evidence of fraud in the proceedings, wanted it to be public record so anyone who cared to look could see exactly what she'd done. Foster said he'd start drafting papers, asked if I'd thought about where I'd stay during the process. I said I'd go to my brother's place. Didn't want to be in that house with her anymore. Foster said he'd have papers ready by the end of the week. I spent those days preparing, moved important documents to David's apartment, packed clothes and personal items gradually so Vanessa wouldn't notice, transferred my portion of our savings to a new account in my name only, changed passwords on all my personal accounts. Foster had advised me to protect myself financially before serving papers because she might try to drain accounts or hide assets once she knew. I followed his advice methodically. Each step felt like closing a door on my old life. Thursday night, Vanessa went to dinner with her friends. I used that time to pack everything I wanted to keep. Photos from before I met her, family heirlooms, my grandfather's watch, important papers. Loaded it all into my truck and drove to David's. He helped me carry boxes upstairs to his spare room, asked if I was okay. I said I'd be okay eventually. Just needed to get through the next part. He offered me a beer. We sat on his couch and watched basketball without really watching. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa asking what I wanted from the store. I said I was good. She sent back a heart emoji. I didn't respond. Friday morning, Foster called. The divorce papers were ready. He'd included everything: the fake pregnancy, the fabricated miscarriage, the stolen $5,000, the Mexico vacation, all of it documented with evidence attached. He'd filed them with the court that morning. A process server would deliver them to Vanessa at her office within the hour. He asked if I was ready. I said yes. Hung up and sat in my truck in the parking lot of my job site. My hands were shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear or sadness. It was anticipation. Finally, she was going to face consequences. Finally, the truth would be public. The call came at 11:30, Vanessa's name on my screen. I let it ring. She called again immediately. I declined it. A text came through. We need to talk. Now. I didn't respond. Another call. Another decline. Then a voicemail. I listened to it. Her voice was shaking, angry, and panicked. She demanded to know what I was doing. How dare I file these lies? How dare I make up such horrible accusations? Said I'd ruined her life. That everyone at her office saw the papers when the process server delivered them. That her boss called her into his office and asked what was going on. That she'd been humiliated in front of her coworkers. She was screaming by the end of the message. I saved it and sent it to Foster. More calls came throughout the day. Her friends calling me, her mother calling me, her sister calling me. I didn't answer any of them. Let them all go to voicemail. Listened to the messages later. Her mother crying, begging me to explain what was happening. Her sister angry, calling me names, saying I was destroying Vanessa over nothing. Her friends defensive, claiming I had everything wrong, that I was being cruel and vindictive. None of them knew the truth yet. They only knew Vanessa's version where I was the villain. Foster had anticipated this. He'd prepared a packet with all the evidence. Medical records proving no pregnancy. Bank statements showing the withdrawn money. Credit card charges from Cancun. Screenshots of her research about faking miscarriages. Photos of the medical supply receipt. Text messages about the Mexico trip. He sent it to Vanessa's attorney with a note that we'd be releasing this information publicly if she contested anything in the divorce. That we had proof of fraud and were prepared to pursue criminal charges if necessary. The ball was in her court. Her attorney called Foster that afternoon. Asked if we'd consider mediation. Foster said no. This was non-negotiable. The terms were simple. She admitted to the fraud publicly, agreed to the divorce terms including her paying restitution for the stolen money, and we wouldn't press criminal charges. If she fought it, we'd take everything public and pursue prosecution. Her attorney said she needed time to review the evidence and discuss with her client. Foster gave her 24 hours. I stayed at David's that weekend. Turned off my phone because the calls and messages were constant. Vanessa's friends had started a group chat demanding I explain myself. Her family was threatening legal action. People who barely knew me were sending messages about what a terrible person I was. I didn't care. Let them think what they wanted. Once the truth came out, they'd all understand. Or they wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. Monday morning, Foster called. Vanessa's attorney had reviewed the evidence and advised her client to accept the terms. Vanessa was going to sign a statement admitting she faked the pregnancy and miscarriage to obtain money fraudulently. The statement would be part of the public divorce record. She'd pay back the $5,000 plus interest. She'd cover all legal fees. In exchange, we wouldn't pursue criminal charges. Foster asked if I agreed to these terms. I did. He said he'd have final papers drawn up by end of day. The statement was released to the court on Wednesday. It immediately became public record. Someone from Vanessa's office must have been checking the court filings because by that afternoon, it was spreading through her workplace. By evening, it had reached her social circle. By the next morning, her friends were calling me again, this time apologizing, saying they had no idea, that Vanessa had told them she'd miscarried, that she needed the trip to heal, that they'd believed her completely. Jessica cried on my voicemail. Brittany sent a long text about feeling used and manipulated. Kayla said she felt sick, knowing she'd participated in something so cruel. Amy just sent one word. Sorry. Vanessa's mother called me sobbing, said she'd read the court documents and couldn't believe her daughter had done this, asked what had happened to her little girl. I didn't have an answer. Her sister called too, quieter now, apologetic, said the family was devastated, that they were trying to get Vanessa into therapy, but she was refusing, that she'd moved back in with their parents and wasn't speaking to anyone. I listened, but didn't offer comfort. Their grief wasn't my responsibility. The story made it to local media somehow. A reporter called asking for comment. I declined through Foster, but the story ran anyway. Woman fakes miscarriage to fund vacation, husband exposes fraud in divorce filing. It went viral on social media. Reddit threads popped up discussing it. Twitter had opinions. The comments were brutal. People called Vanessa every name imaginable. Some expressed sympathy for her mental health issues. Most condemned her actions as unforgivable. The story took on a life of its own, beyond my control. Vanessa's employer released a statement that they were investigating the matter and had placed her on administrative leave pending review. A week later, they terminated her employment. She'd apparently lied on expense reports too, claiming business expenses for personal purchases. The fake miscarriage investigation had opened other cans of worms. Everything was unraveling for her publicly while I watched from a distance. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Fastest divorce Foster had ever processed, he said. Vanessa didn't contest anything. Signed everything her attorney put in front of her. I got the house, most of our assets, the dog. She got her car and her personal belongings. She was ordered to pay me back the $5,000 plus another $3,000 in restitution for emotional damages. Foster said that was unusual, but the judge was clearly disgusted by her behavior. I didn't attend the final hearing, didn't want to see her. Foster represented me and called afterward to say it was done. I was officially divorced, officially free, officially able to move forward with my life. I felt relieved and empty at the same time. 7 years of my life had been built on lies I never suspected. That kind of betrayal changes you fundamentally. Dr. Ellis helped me process everything over the following months, helped me understand that trusting again would be hard but possible, that not everyone is a compulsive liar, that I could learn to recognize red flags I'd missed before, that healing takes time but happens if you let it. I saw her weekly for 6 months, then bi-weekly, then monthly. Eventually, I didn't need her anymore. The anger had faded into something more manageable. Acceptance, maybe. Understanding that some people are fundamentally broken in ways you can't fix. A year later, I was doing okay. Living alone in the house with Copper. Working my job. Seeing friends. Dating occasionally, though nothing serious. I'd learned to be more cautious with my trust. More aware of inconsistencies in people's stories. The experience had made me harder in some ways. Softer in others. I was more empathetic to people going through betrayal. More willing to believe victims of manipulation. More understanding that things aren't always what they seem on the surface. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Vanessa had moved to another state, started over somewhere people didn't know her story. I hoped she got help, hoped she stopped lying and manipulating, but mostly I tried not to think about her at all. She was a chapter of my life that was closed, a painful lesson I'd learned and survived. David asked me once if I regretted exposing her the way I did, if I wished I'd handled it privately instead of making it public. I thought about it honestly before answering, said no. She'd chosen to fake one of the most traumatic things a couple can experience. She'd stolen our money, lied to everyone we knew, manipulated an entire network of people. The truth needed to come out. People who'd been fooled deserved to know, and she needed to face real consequences for actions that were criminal and cruel. Destroying her reputation wasn't revenge. It was justice. It was the truth finally being told after months of lies. If you made it this far, you've earned it. The truth always surfaces eventually. Sometimes it just needs someone brave enough to drag it into the light.